If you were going to tell a serving member that if they stayed in for 10 years, that their kid would have the ability to tap into almost $80,000 of post-secondary school fees, I guarantee you'd have a lot of people staying in for that.
How can a set of skills lead you down the path to success? That's what we're setting out to answer on the EdUp Canada Podcast. I'm your host, Michael Sangster. Join me as we unpack how leaders around the world have taken training and skills and turned that into a lasting career. Now let's learn together. Welcome back to the EdUp Canada Podcast. I'm Michael Sangster, your host. For episode 55, people said we wouldn't make it to 5, and now we've got 2 5s, so pretty excited to be here today. I am joined by the CEO of the Together We Stand Foundation, Rick Seymour, and I'm excited because we're chatting about doing a little bit of work on a project together to support military families, and I wanted to have Rick come on and talk about what they do. We'll have news on our project later, but Rick, tell us a little bit about yourself and then talk a little bit about Together We Stand and what you do.
First off, thanks for having me, Michael. So Together We Stand Foundation was started in 2017 by Rick and Lillian Eckstein, and they really just wanted to give back to a segment of the Canadian population that they felt was a bit underserved in this country, and I happen to agree with them. I met them back in 2018 and helped them launch the organization, took over as CEO in later parts of 2019. Our organization seeks to augment and fill gaps in supports and services for military families. That is inclusive, of course, of soldiers, sailors, and aviators, of transitioning members or veterans. However, there is an ecosystem around our military that most people don't often recognize, which is the family, inclusive of spouses, kids, brothers, sisters, parents, whatever that ecosystem is around the family that's serving. And our organization looks to educate the civilian population about the military family, why Canada needs a military, why those families need supports and services in order to properly serve. We like to honor those families through gifts when they're on deployment, through emergency financial support if needed, and we like to support them in their times of need. So we've been doing that for the last 7 years or so. We now have 4 programs operationally, and we'll be looking to onboard a couple of others in the coming months and year ahead.
So talk to me a little bit. We've had some meetings. I've gone through your site again this morning. Talk to me about one of those things you might offer somebody deployed abroad that would be helpful for them just to feel comfortable with what's going on in their life. And then maybe something you do that supports a family that's here while someone's abroad.
Yeah. So one of the things that I learned, and again, I'm not a military family person myself, so it was learned through meeting military families all across Canada and sitting down with them in coffee shops or local family resource centers and asking them, what it's like to go through a deployment. Because being a kid who grew up in the suburb of Toronto, not something that really crossed my radar a lot. And, one of the things that a lot of the military families that I would sit down and speak with would tell me is that when their loved ones are deployed, they're doing what they love. They're with their military family, they're on mission, they're doing their thing, and that's great. But the family's left to carry on. That could be a spouse having to manage 2 kids and schedules all by themselves, not having a family support system around them, because oftentimes military families have to move every 2 to 3 years to a new posting. And so, while the military members themselves have everything that they need while they're deployed overseas, the families back home oftentimes are feeling the pinch of added stress of having to shovel driveways while managing, multiple activities for kids or what have you. And so one of the things that we've done is, instead of giving a gift of thanks to a soldier that's overseas or sailor or aviator, we actually send a care package to the family member back home who's dealing with everything on the home front. So the soldier, sailor, aviator gets to nominate whether it's a spouse, a kid, a parent, a sibling, in some cases a friend. And we send them a digital care package that has a prepaid MasterCard on it for $50 so they can buy a pizza or take the kids to McDonald's or a bottle of wine, whatever they need, as well as some other gifts from sponsors, grocery delivery, discounts on flights, those types of things. And just really a note of thanks to say, hey, hang in there. We're thinking about you. Since we started that program in 2018, we've distributed almost 16,000 care packages to families all across the country, and some in places that aren't in Canada. with about over $4 million of cash and gifts that have gone in that. So that's the way we sort of acknowledge the families that are left behind while our men and women are serving.
I've had the pleasure of spending a lot of time with General Rick Hillier, the former CDS of Canadian military. He became a good friend. And he talks about the battle buddies. And they are happy when they're with their guys. They're with their ladies. They're their battle buddies that they serve with. So you're bang on. And it's not fun. He talked about the base commander funds and the need to make sure the base commanders could support those families that are at home while they were abroad. And it was a different time when I was chatting with him about this. They were still serving in Afghanistan, and there were different things going on. But our soldiers are putting their lives at risk every day they go out and serve, whether it's been on a Navy ship or in the Air Force or in the Army. Something can go wrong. And that stress comes back to the house. So you guys are doing something about that. So my members, we're focused on career training, getting people up to speed, getting them up to start a new career, take on a new job. Our average learner is a little bit older, more predominantly female. Talk to me a little bit about the effects on spousal employment, because I think this is something. We're going to be airing this episode about 2 days after the election. We're going to have a new government, some form. This is something we can all help with, isn't it? As employers, as educators, helping the spouses and the children of active military find work and finding consistent work that travels as they get bounced around.
No question. It's one of the biggest areas of need, in my opinion, as we look to the military community and how we can better support not only recruitment, but retention and operational readiness. One of the biggest differences between civilians in this country and military families is that most civilians have a dual income. Most civilians have the stability of staying in one place for a period of time. Spouses, they don't sign up for moving every 2 years. They fall in love, they raise a family, and they have to follow those individuals around or live without them for years on a time. And not many family members would do that. So one of the things that faces them as a challenge is, how do you maintain stability within a career perspective if every year or 2 years you have to move? I spent a little bit of time in recruitment throughout my life, and I can tell you, if I saw job gaps for longer than 6 months, or somebody who went from job to job to job to job, 8 jobs in 10 years, that would look like somebody who's unstable on a resume. There's nowhere to put military spouse, must move every 2 years. That's the reason for this. Or why is somebody who has a degree in psychotherapy or massage therapy or is a registered nurse not be able to get a job in several different provinces? There's a variety of things that can be done, whether it's removal of interprovincial trade barriers. We've seen recently that Premier Ford and the government of Ontario have reached a bilateral agreement with the province of New Brunswick to remove some of those barriers. And I think we can be doing more to create a seamless Canada in a way. There was an initiative that started a bunch of years ago called Seamless Canada that hasn't really moved the needle forward, but to allow for professional designation credits to transfer across province, to allow certain professions to be able to recertify in a quicker way, barrier-free. Every province needs doctors, every province needs nurses, every province needs teachers, every province needs all of these types of things. Understanding what are the professions that we can kind of train these people up for, do so quickly. How can they do those things remotely? And then how can they port them from province to province to province as they go? Because I think, quite frankly, if members of the military family community are able to have that dual income, if spouses are able to work, if kids are able to go to school and have stability there, I think you'd see a lot more members stay in it. I know that members wouldn't be leaving as quickly as they are because their families wouldn't be saying, this is too hard for us. And when the soldier, sailor, aviator is being met with that question from their family, choose between us and your career, that outcome's not going to look great for the Canadian Armed Forces.
Rick, that's a great point on the veterans benefit piece. Let me talk a little bit more about what if we change that program? What if we look towards moving it into supporting military spouses or military children when the individual is serving the country? Maybe that would have a bigger impact on our military, supporting them as they transition out of serving our nation. What are your thoughts on that?
I can guarantee you it would help you with retention, no question. Many of the individuals that I know that have left, whether it's after 10, 15, 20 years, they don't know what they want to do. And they would love for their spouse or for their kids to have benefited from their service by providing free post-secondary education. Those veterans, they may not want to become doctors or nurses or whatever that might be, cybersecurity experts, but I can guarantee you their spouses and their kids would. So if you really want to look at an incentive of a policy that is already in place, just add a word spouse or dependent to that.
You wouldn't even have to increase the benefit because the benefit is very generous. Just allow it to be used in a different way is your point.
And it's not even being fully used.
It's not. I know it's not. It's up to $78,000 for some. That is hard to get to. That's a big number to get to in spending in post-secondary education in Canada.
If you were going to tell a serving member that if they stayed in for 10 years, that their kid would have the ability to tap into almost $80,000 of post-secondary school fees, I guarantee you'd have a lot of people staying in for that.
And you might have a spouse split it half-half and go into a career college, a university, or a community college.
And then start having a profession that can pay you more taxes, it's an absolute no-brainer. And I think it's really a line or two of text in an already existing policy.
It's a great point, and I think we're going to add that to our advocacy list. Another one I've noticed in your site you guys talk a lot about is the mental health side too, the isolation. Do you want to chat a little bit about some of the work that you guys are doing at that end?
Yeah, I think when it comes to mental health isolation, going through birthdays, celebrations, all those types of things without a loved one, I think about kids that, maybe their mom or dad aren't around for a graduation or for a big sports game, or, ability to come home and talk after a rough day. Like, more and more Canadians are feeling issues of mental health and isolation and not knowing kind of how to process that or manage that. And for a lot of people, their family or whoever they consider their family or closest ones, having that ability to communicate is critically important. But if you don't know where mom or dad is, and if you don't know when their ship is coming into port, or they don't have the ability to FaceTime, or, if you're in the special forces community and you actually can't talk to that individual, that adds a tremendous amount of burden, especially when a lot of people in this country are talking about, why do we need a military, or at least over the last few years, and these kids have to explain to a new community, a new friend, what it is their mom or dad does and why they've come to a seventh school in 9 years. That's a lot for a 12, 13-year-old. I couldn't even imagine that. One of my good friends now who does a lot of work for us, he is a military kid. I ask him where he's from and he says Canada, with like an inflection like, Canada? Not really sure, because he moved 12 times in 16 years growing up. My parents are still in the same house that I grew up in 38 years ago. And, I think it's understanding first and foremost what these families go through, and not trying to prescribe what they need to do, but giving them opportunities to find the solutions for themselves. And I think, trying to go to them versus bringing them to us, we have these natural inclinations, I find, to bring people to the epicenters of Toronto or Vancouver and Montreal. That's not where these families live. That's where these families will have to protect at some point, I'm sure. But, we have to be able to get services to them in Shiloh, Manitoba, in Cold Lake, Alberta. And so how do we connect the mental services, the medical services, and those types of things, and get those to them versus having to drive them 3 hours down to Edmonton, putting the cost on the vehicle and putting the toll on them in order to get the services that they need. It's backwards. And so some of the work we're doing and would like to do in that space, as well as what we were just talking about from the spousal employment perspective, the onus can't be on the military community to come to the civilian community. I think for too long, we've asked the military community not only to protect and serve for us, but if they have a problem, they need to come here because that's where we are. Well, no, I actually think we need to do more work going to them. And I think whether it's mental services, employment, housing, all these types of things that we want to address, what's best for them? Because then these people will not only want to join the military, they'll want to stay in it, and they'll be proud of that. And you talk about Mr. Trump, other than some nice gifts and a couple of things that you said, I think this is a unique opportunity to kind of bring back the pride in Canada and pride in the Maple Leaf that perhaps hasn't necessarily been there.
Interestingly, I think we've had the pride in the military though, but we've not stepped to the next level. So I love I talk to a lot of employers, and I'll tell you what they're looking for: hardworking, loyal, dedicated people. Well, that's a veteran. So we've spent a lot of time working with Veterans Affairs Canada. We've built a website, trainingveterans.ca, to help veterans find out about the academic benefit that they're eligible to. But we're spending more time focusing on the spouses too, because I think the spousal employment and the childcare are probably the two biggest challenges they face when I have conversations with people who are active in the military. And when it's time to move towards retirement and leave the military, there is an incredible amount of stress because they may be the number one breadwinner in the house. And what's that transition look like when they move out? Although there's an education benefit, that might be 6 months to a year or 2 years or 3 years to go take a program. And we're working a lot on how do we move those skills into employers. So it's a little bit about why we're chatting and why I think we can all talk about doing more. Talk to me a little bit before we get into a couple of our questions we always ask. I am interested to hear about your emergency fund because I think it's important for people to understand what that is. And we will post a link to that so that people can choose to donate to what you're doing. But talk about this emergency fund, because in my travels with General Hillier and with others, that emergency, that financial emergency is probably the biggest stress point on a family, military family. It happens.
It does. And sometimes things happen, right, in life. And it's not because of a financial mismanagement. It's not because you necessarily did something wrong or made poor decisions. Sometimes that's the case, but sometimes, expletive just happens.
Mm-hmm.
And the reality is
you can say shit happens on this podcast. We're okay with that, Rick.
All right. Well, we didn't cover that before, but yeah, sometimes shit does happen. And so again, every program that we've created, every mechanism that we have put in place to support a military family has been because nothing else previously has existed. I do not believe in redundancy. I think duplicating services that already exist, even if those services may not be as efficient, is what's required. We look to fill gaps and ask families, ask chaplains and padres, ask generals, sure, but more importantly, ask the privates and the corporals and ask their families what's needed. And so many times we were faced with a scenario where a chaplain or a padre who, yes, there's a religious connotation or a faith-based connotation there, is also a frontline social worker for a military family, will get calls in the middle of a night saying there's a leak in a roof, or the heat went off, or there's a medical emergency and I have to drive my child to somewhere and I can't cover the gas. And what was happening is that even though the chaplains or duty padres would have a few $100s worth of gift cards for groceries, rotisserie chicken wasn't going to help them put a fix on the roof that night or turn the heat back on. So they were taking money out of their own pockets. One of the things that was in place before was asking people for a lot of self-identifying information. So there are mechanisms. However, the serving member, not a spouse or anybody else, would have to put down their service number, their name and everything, apply for it. The funds would take weeks to arrive, and then receipts would have to be given out as a loan. And a lot of that was causing some trepidation, vulnerability, and exposing that there are some issues and could actually put the member at risk of not being able to be deployed. So the chaplains asked us, hey, is there a way that you could distribute these funds more rapidly? 72 hours, no questions asked, we'll give you the information. And we said, sure. And we identified areas like food security, housing, childcare, medical care, transportation. Those were areas that traditionally weren't being covered. And so we've created a program that's delivered through the chaplains and padres where they make the request on the service family's behalf. We don't collect any tombstone data, but we collect what the rank is, the region, what the reason was for. It's a non-payback donation that we make to the family in the denomination of $100 to $1,000. Within 72 hours, that family gets the funds directly. We don't know who they are and they don't know who we are. And it's done completely anonymously through the padre. They can use those funds for whatever they need. And to date, we've distributed almost $600,000 over the last 2 years to 1,800 families across this country that otherwise may have had an issue putting food on the table, may have had an issue getting a child to a specialized appointment, may have had nowhere to live for a couple of days because something at the house happened. And to help out those that are willing to sacrifice so much for us in their most vulnerable time is something that I feel like it's a true honor for us to be able to do. Unfortunately, I wish it never happened, but as we said at the start of this, sometimes shit happens, and to be able to be there for them and not turn them away is kind of what that program does.
I love that process because of the anonymity of it, but the empowerment of a chaplain on the base command, on the base, to just move forward with a decision and help that family.
Just say yes.
Really well, simple design program. You just say yes and get it done, right? And I think that we could all make a little donation of that cause alone just to help make sure those military families are well taken care of. So I applaud you for that. I think it's a great program, but just the empowerment of the chaplain on the ground to just act. Too many things are bureaucratic.
Yeah, and that's one of the biggest things that our organization, I think, provides is that we are completely privately funded, no public dollars whatsoever. We've been set up and designed that way because once you start taking money from the government and then all of a sudden there's red tape, there's bureaucracies, there's reporting structures. We want to be completely independent of all of that. We do have a board of directors. We're a non-for-profit CRA, good standing approved public foundation. We run our own programs. We don't just raise funds to distribute to other organizations. Last year, we had an overhead marketing and administrative cost of 12%, meaning 88 cents from every dollar goes out the door, we're quite proud of that. But I think, more than anything, it's the agility, the ability to react quickly and design programs that are needed, that don't exist, that help keep families not only serving, but hopefully longer from leaving. And that effectively helps with readiness. There's a lot more that we need to do to be proactive as a country, as a military. But I would stress it's not the people in the institution. It's not the military leaders that are now that, are a hindrance here. I think it starts in other areas in the public domain that we need to make sure that civilians, government officials, and the bureaucratic individuals that are there right now understand that we need to build now, because 5 years, 10 years from now, we are going to need a stronger military. And we're just kind of at the tip of the iceberg with what Mr. Trump's been saying now.
And I'm doing some work on the recruitment side with a few branches of the military. And I've noticed, especially the Navy, very focused on this. And they've done a good job of increasing their recruitment. And we're working on some things. I'm going to go back out on a ship in May, talking to people on board about the kind of careers that are available on these ships. They're great jobs. They pay well. They've got the neatest new recruitment tool I've seen yet. It's 1 year. It's a 1 year kind of try and buy program that we spoke to. We had Captain Anderson on a couple episodes ago, and he talked about this. You can literally join the Navy for a year and you leave after a year, no questions asked, but you go serve with them for a year and see if it's for you. And I thought that's a great creative way of getting people in the door. Let's talk a little bit about you. We always ask people this. So tell me a little bit about, you're obviously taking this role on. You've been there, I think, since 2019. What's a skill that makes you successful at what you do? Because we have students that listen to this program. We have instructors that listen to it. They're always interested in what makes someone successful. And is it something you learned later in life or something you had earlier?
I think it's a combination of things, really. I think first and foremost, this is a cause that I feel deeply passionate about. I feel like serving my country in this capacity is an honor, I suppose. And I've done a variety of things in life, from playing professional golf to marketing to tech firms, and now I'm here. And I can tell you that every single day I wake up since I took this job, I love what I do. I feel like there is a purpose in it, and that I get to make my family proud and our team proud, and these families who I'll never know, maybe their life a little bit easier. And so I think being able to do something in your life, whatever it is, if you have passion behind it and it's truly something you love to do, then there really is no bounds. And then I think you couple that with my background in sports. I grew up playing sports my whole life at a relatively high level. I was very fortunate to have a support system and a mom and a dad who allowed me to do those types of things. My dad used to, say the only place success comes before work was in a dictionary. So, I think it's kind of this notion that you can have all the talent in the world, but if you don't work hard, it's not going to take you very far. And so kind of trying to remain humble in those things. I think it's normal in life, especially with social media today, to, see what's out there and highlight reels and social media and content creation, and, think that you should be driving a specific type of car or have a certain type of girlfriend or boyfriend or a size of a house, and I think it's later in life you realize that, well, those things are nice. It's not really what matters. And so, it's trying to block out that noise, find something that you love and allows you to work hard because you feel like it's not working hard at all. And so I think, just those are kind of the keys: passion, hard work, and staying humble, I think are things that I've tried to, focus on.
I'm going to steal that. Success comes before work only in the dictionary. I've not actually heard that one before. If I have, I've forgotten it. So that's a good one. Talk to me quickly about a mentor in your life, somebody who's made a difference. We talk about this because we think it's important with people around career education, that they understand as instructors, as placement supervisors, they have a big, big impact on people. So who impacted you that you on a path?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, in a personal, obviously it was my parents. I was very fortunate to have loving parents. I had a dad who, left a dairy farm in New Brunswick when he was 16 without graduating high school, and 40 years later built a successful IT business and allowed my family to grow and prosper. So certainly, some lessons from him in a personal perspective. But on a professional side, good friend of mine who's now the CEO of the PGA of Canada. I call him a friend now. He's about 30 years my senior, but he'll hate me for saying that. He gave me my first job when I was 14, gave me an opportunity, showed me the ropes, put me into a role that was going to push me at a golf course with older guys at Angus Glen. And he was somebody that really told me the value on how to talk to a human being, treat a human being, look somebody in the eye, say their name, remember who they were, see them again the next year, customer service, build relationships. If you're on time, you're late, put in the extra hours. And I think, his name was Kevin Thistle, and he is somebody who always put somebody else in front of him, would give you the shirt off his back if you asked for it, would go an extra mile to help out a customer, and saw him do some remarkable things for people he'd never met in his life. And he always believed that if you put the good out in the world, it'll come back at you tenfold. And, a super humble, hardworking guy, like I said, who was passionate about, what he was doing in golf. And now he's the CEO of the PGA of Canada and thriving in life. And so, I just kind of remember, having somebody give me an opportunity, believe in me, push me outside my barriers, but in a safe sort of way. And I think, education is not too dissimilar. There's teachers and professors that I've had along the way too, that, the really good ones are the ones who encourage you to speak up in class and to make mistakes in presentations, and will take the time to explain how you could do something better versus, just treat you as a number. And I think maybe that's the East Coaster in me. If somebody asks, or if I ask somebody how they're doing, I genuinely want to know. And I think, we could have more of that in this world, and hopefully we will.
Awesome. And I hope that Kevin gets a chance to hear you talk about him today, because we've actually asked a lot of people whether or not they know if their mentor knows that they were one or not. And it's interesting how many people go, "Oh, I'm not sure he would know. I'm not sure she would know."
No, he does. I embarrassed him a while ago at an event where, I got him to write me into the PGA of Canada when I got my card at 19. And so I've been trying to pay him back for that for years, and a variety of other things. And like I said, we're actually now good friends. He just got married again, and we had a bachelor party for him a little while ago. So
we're not very fortunate.
You said I could swear on the podcast.
We'll let you swear on the podcast, but we're not going to get into what happened at the bachelor party. So let me circle back to one last thing before we go, because we're obviously trying to do a little bit of work together to support military families, and I think we'll have some fun stuff to come. But talk to me. I don't have $1 to give. So there's obviously people can go to your website and they can donate, but I'm a person who doesn't have $1 to give. How can they assist your organization or military families in this country? Because we focus on the money sometimes, and I think we forget, and we talk about mentoring, but we forget about the volunteer hours and what that can mean to an organization too, or to a family, or to a base commander in your case, or a chaplain. So do you have a thought on that?
I think the first thing that most civilians can do is just understand that without military in this country, we have nothing to protect us. The reason that we were given the land that we were given was because, and when the lines were redrawn, is because of contributions that were built off of people that served in the Great Wars, and even before that. And I think for too long we have held an indifference towards people that wear a uniform here, and not dissimilar from a first responder that you'll see more often: fire, police, ambulance. You hope you never need the military to show up. You really do. They're the last line of defense, first line of defense, whatever your viewpoint is, but they're the insurance policy you hope you never have to cash in on. The first thing I would always say is, if you see somebody in a uniform, just say thank you. Educate yourself on what would your life be like if there was nobody to protect you. If you had no police officers, or no fire, or no ambulance, if you had no military, what would stop the American people, or any other country for that matter, from just coming over and saying, "Hey, we want this place. It looks pretty nice."
Or the work we do around the world to protect others, which is probably even more important, right?
As part of coalitions to protect the international rules-based order. I think the main thing, though, is people at home, they're worried about issues that are on their doorstep right now, right? They're worried about what's hitting their pocketbook, housing affordability, all of those things. And I'm with them. I worry about those things too. But I think the bigger, more macro issue that nobody has been talking about for 20, 30 years is that none of those things matter if you cannot protect your country, if you cannot protect your borders. And for the first time in, I don't know, my lifetime, there is somebody openly talking about annexing us. And I can tell you right now, there's nothing Canada military could do today to protect that. Europe is not sending troops over the Atlantic to help us. Australia is not sailing across the Pacific to help us. If American troops or American president actually wanted to march people up the Don Valley Parkway, we have less than 48 hours of live fire ammunition. We have less troops in our entire armed forces than the National Guard of Arkansas. There is nothing we can do. So if you want to have a house in Canada, if you want to have universal health care, if you think being Canadian is more important than becoming American, if you want to cheer for Sidney Crosby versus Austin Matthews and have the pride of elbows up, you need to understand that without a military, none of that's possible. So start there.
And I don't think any of us are too worried the Americans are actually coming over the border, but that pride in our military and what they do, I know I carry a heavy pride on the place that Canada plays in the world and our peacekeeping missions and our soldiers who served abroad, whether it's Afghanistan, Iraq, World War I, World War II. That's a pride. And we carry that strongly. So we're going to wrap up there, but I was going to say, is there anything last that you want to say about the Together We Stand Foundation, the work that you're doing and what people should know about you? You can find them at twsfoundation.ca. We will put that out with the episode as well. But Rick, is there anything else that you want to say about the organization?
I think it's wonderful if people want to learn more to support the military community. Go online. The easiest thing you could do as a call of action is like us, follow us on any of the socials, help get the word out there, say thank you to some people in the military community. If you want to get educated about how you can help, great, reach out. We'll be happy to share some information. But no, Michael, thank you very much for having me and the opportunity to talk a little bit about what it is that we're doing and hopefully what we'll be doing in the future together.
I'm looking forward to it. I've had the pleasure of getting to know your team, Stephanie particularly, but also Kaylee. You got a great team doing great stuff. And if we can just tell your story a little bit more to our audience and have our audience tell it to other people, that's a benefit to you and what you're doing. And we're fully behind what the foundation's doing and how you're trying to support our troops. So with that, I'll leave this week's episode. Rick, thanks for joining us. And I look forward to everybody joining us again on next week's edition of the EdUp Canada Podcast. Thanks for listening. Thanks for listening to another episode of the EdUp Canada Podcast. We release new episodes regularly, so make sure you hit that subscribe button so you know when they are officially out. If you love this episode, please leave a 4- or 5-star review wherever you listen to your podcasts so that others can also discover how a set of skills can lead to success. Thanks for learning with us.